Hey, Pamela, I think all is sweetness and light. You can go ahead.
Thank you, Paul. Yeah. So welcome. My name is Pamela Schreiner, and my great interest in life is systems and structures, broadly speaking, and the impact that these systems and structures are having on our world. And I think it's very relevant for beloved community, as you'll see as I go along and speak more about what I see with what's happening with systems and structures. So one of the big questions for me in terms of systems and structures is it's basically we organize to come together to get things done as a collective. And so we have different systems and structures that we use to come together to get things done as human beings together. So what is a system? What is a structure? So I've got something very simple to illustrate that for you. So here you see these pieces. So a system consists of parts. And so these parts are wooden pieces that are painted. And in order to see the whole system, what we need to do is put the parts together. And so these parts are pieces where one piece is nested in the next piece. So the structure of this system is a nested structure. And so you could say this has a fractal structure, this particular system. One set of dolls is nested within the other. So the structure is the fractal structure. The system is the parts, the components that make up the system. So that's systems and structures. And so one of the things in this world is we're embedded in systems and structures all over the place. And unless we become aware of them, we're not seeing the big variety of all the systems and structures. And so some examples of the systems and structures, so the most obvious one is corporations and other organizations, institutions, governments. Our family is also a system that consists of the different people that are part of the system. And our bodies are systems, and our bodies are systems that consist of a lot of other systems. So our body has a circulatory system and a nervous system, and a beehive is a system, an anthill is a system, a beloved community is a system. What does that kind of system look like? And our cultures are also systems. And our cultures happen to be systems that are constantly reflecting back our values to us. So there's a constant back and forth between us as a species and then the cultures that we're in. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself. And I guess that'll illustrate why I ended up being interested in systems and structures in this world and the impact that it's having on us. So I was born in London, England, the big center of colonialism. And I see my story about systems and structures as also being one of colonialism. You'll probably get that later on. And then when I was about nearly 4 years old, I moved to Vienna, and Vienna was also another big center of colonialism, the Austro-Hungarian Empire. And then when I was nearly 5 years old, I moved to Saskatchewan in Canada, in the prairies. And having moved from these big, gray, cocooning cities to the wide open prairies with big blue sky and lots of wind, I felt really lost. It was such a big contrast, a big change for me. And so I had moved to the prairies in Saskatchewan in the 50s. so after World War II. And at that point, in grade 1, I only spoke German, and I didn't know that I was speaking the wrong language. So I ended up feeling like an outcast. The circumstances that I found myself in. And then in, I don't know, grade 2 or grade 3, there was a particular incident that probably had a big impact on my systems and structures interest. What happened is in class, I said something about being German. And all of a sudden, the boys in class, they started to point their fingers at me and go, and so, because we'd been learning about the Second World War and Hitler and what had happened there. And I was devastated, being already feeling like an outcast anyways. And so that started my thinking, what happened there? You know, what happened in Europe? And so I learned about the Second World War and what had happened to the Jewish people, and so one of the theories that formed in my young mind was that, and so I fortunately had a German parent and an Austrian parent, and having a German parent and an Austrian parent, I could see that that Germans were more orderly and rule following, as my father was, and that the Austrians, my mother, was a lot more chaotic. And so that was, you know, a tension within our home. And so I formed the theory, whether right or wrong, that there's some big downsides to being orderly and rule following. So then when I became an adult, I ended up working in the high-tech sector for 22 years. And I ended up working on architecting massive multi-million line computer systems. And so that taught me about, in high-tech systems, computer systems, about systems and structures and different ways to put it together. And then later on, I ended up working as a management consultant in performance measurement and organizational structure. So then I ended up seeing human systems, and I learned that there's a lot of experimentation going on with different kinds of human systems and how they can be put together and how they might work in different ways. And then once I'd gotten into retirement, then I started to learn about complexity science. And complexity science gave me the understanding of what are the principles that drive the different types of systems. So all these different things, putting them together, helped me to understand systems and structures. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to share my screen, and we're going to look at the evolution of the Earth. And so for me, the evolution of the Earth, how things have gone, really spoke to me about the impact that systems and structures have had and are having on our world. So I'll share my screen. So is it working? Can you see the shared screen?
Works perfectly, Pamela.
Okay. So okay, so this, the name of this presentation, I'm a bit late on that, is called Beloved Community of Systems View, so that you know you're in the right room. And yeah, I think, and so change the lens, change the world. I think how we see things has a big impact on what's going on in this world. And so the first story of evolution that I want to tell is an Indigenous story. And this text is from Paula Underwood, who was a woman who was of European descent and also of Oneida descent. And she wrote many lovely, lovely books. So what she says about the evolution of the world is, in the beginning, there was Thought Woman, and she was whole. After a while, Spider Woman came and spun out of the wholeness of thought the individuation of perception, spun the threads of individuation and wove a universe with it. I love these words. For me, they're very meaningful. And now what we'll do is we'll look at evolution. What we'll do now is we'll look at evolution more from a historic and scientific perspective. So after the Big Bang, the waters appeared on Earth. So we're going all the way back to the beginning. And soon amoeba and bacteria appeared on Earth. And then more creatures appeared on Earth. First creatures appeared in the waters, and then creatures appeared on the land. So the Earth was evolving and forming. And after a little while, humans appeared. And so basically what we see happening here, it's a self-organizing system that is forming and growing slowly over the years. So a self-organizing system means that it's not being centrally controlled. The evolution, the impetus for evolution is everywhere. And evolution is a natural process that is always moving forward. And then humans wanted protection. So then humans started building these structures, these houses to live in. And then with time, humans started to come together in communities, and they built roads to connect their structures, and they started to specialize. You'd have the shoemaker, you'd have the farmer, you might have the person who made the cloth. So it was an evolving system. And then with I guess in the time of the Greeks and the Romans, we started to build larger and larger systems. So people came together to build aqueducts for entertainment, for education, and a government, a larger government formed. Governments collected taxes and they built roads. And so basically nation states are forming, and I'm representing them as four-sided entities, because the in Mayan numerology, four-sided means it indicates man-made, and in sacred geometry, four-sided is reason, stability, and order. So that's what I see in these kinds of systems and structures that are forming. And then the next thing is all of these empires that we've built, they always collapse at some point in time. So the Greek Empire collapsed, the Roman Empire collapsed, the Incan Empire collapsed. And one question is, are we in a collapse now ourselves? It's a question. I don't know the answer for sure. And then later on, I guess a couple hundred years ago, what started happening is corporations started forming. And so these corporations are structured generally in a top-down command, as a top-down command and control system. There's someone at the top who is in charge, who tells the organization what to do. And so this has been going on for hundreds of years, and our nation states are also, the governments are also formed in this kind of way. They're also command and control structures. And then invariably what happens is these organizations, they invariably cause some major disasters in the world. For example, we've had the we've had pipeline spills by some major pipeline spills by Enbridge, and we've had the BP Gulf oil disaster, and then Exxon Valdez ship spilled oil on the West Coast. We've had the Fukushima disaster, Chernobyl, and there's the 2008 financial collapse, and then just organizations are often downsizing, which causes a lot of trauma for the people within the organization. So this is an ongoing thing that we see happening in this world. And now, one of the things that we see happening is there's a lot of global institutions forming. And a lot of, like, religions are global. We have the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, and then the UN is a global organization. The US dollar is a global currency, and a lot of our energy systems are quite global. We have the World Court and simply air travel and ship travel that we generally all take part in. So, you know, for me, the big question when I see these global organizations forming, and with what I see, I wonder, you know, is that a good thing? How's that gonna, how's this gonna work out for us human beings? So, yeah. So basically, the two main patterns that we've seen at the bottom of the screen, you can see the waves, which basically represents our self-organizing system. And then we have these command and control type systems that we humans are using for our human structured systems. And so basically these two are constantly going along and evolving side by side. So it's kind of two main patterns of organizational structure that we're seeing in the world. And there's a lot of in between, a lot of variation in between. So the next the next thing that I want to tell you about is I see four in the command and control systems. I see four different traits that I think are really illustrate what's going on in these organizations and can really inform us too in terms of what to think and how to navigate these systems. And it turns out that these four traits relate to the characters in The Wizard of Oz. So I don't know if you all know the story, but so Dorothy in the middle is not, so the four traits relate to all of the characters but Dorothy. Maybe Dorothy represents a self-organizing system. I don't know, but that's where I put Dorothy. She's part of the self-organizing system. And then the lion, he wanted courage. The Tin Man wanted a heart. The wizard, that's the man with the top hat, he was managing the big illusion of Emerald City. And then the straw man, he wanted a brain. So I'm going to go now and tell you the four traits that I see in command and control type organizations. So the first one that I see is in a command and control organizations, it's structured in such a way that decisions are supposed to flow from the top down to the people. And because of this way of being structured, what it essentially means is that the brains of the organization are being reduced to the top, 1, 2, 3 people in the organization. And everybody else is basically is there to follow the rules and to do what basically to do what they're being told to do. And so what I see in this type of structure is that, the brains of the organization are being reduced to a few, and even though there's all these brains, they're not working together. So there are other possibilities in the world. There's what could be called a self-organizing system or a network structure. So they're essentially the same thing. So in this kind of organization, the goal is to structure the organization so that all brains can be online and working together in relationship. So the next trait that I see is that corporations and governments and institutions, they really understand the importance of vision and mission and purpose. And so they do a lot of work to try and clarify their vision and mission and purpose within an organization. However, invariably, what we do see happening is that with time, somehow the vision and the mission and purpose are become less and less. And what happens is that the goal of the organization becomes sustainment of the organization itself. And so what this means is that the people are letting their hearts kind of go, not be prominent, dominant, and it becomes about sustaining the organization. And since morality and ethics actually live in the heart, if the goal is keeping the organization going, you know, what's that doing to our organizations and to our world? I see it's a profound impact. And yeah. So I'm going to go on to the next trait that I see in organizations. So the next trait that I see in organizations is that, so on the left, we see, I guess, a command and control system, and the green entity is toppled over. So in a command and control, like invariably in any organization system structure, there's going to be one part that's not working so well. For example, in a healthcare system, you might realize that one group of people is not being serviced as well as other groups of people. So then what you might do is you might go in and you might go try and make a change to the system so that this group of people is being served better. And so then invariably what happens then, a different part of the system doesn't work so well. So we see the green toppled over command and control structure in a different part of the system. And so this can cause us to, you know, lose courage. Like, what is it that we're doing? What is, you know, we make a change and something else goes wrong. And so we might continue ahead to try to make changes, or we might lose courage and we might not try to make any changes anymore. So, you know, this is a pattern that we do see in systems when we're looking at our systems and trying to make changes in the system. So change management has become a big field because making changes in these types of systems is very difficult. And one of the reasons, what I see is that these systems they're structured like a pyramid. And a pyramid is actually meant to be a strong, stable structure that lasts forever. And so if we're setting up our organizations in that way, and yet we want to make changes to the system to adapt them, so then what happens is, yes, we make changes, but we have to design in the changes, and we're not sure of the repercussions, and it becomes a complicated process, and we actually then often make changes, but we don't know the results that are really going to happen at like on the ground. So the fourth trait that I see in organizations, and so this is well known. So we have the pink box is our standard type of organizational structure. It's a top-down hierarchy. And one of the things that you have in any organization is you also have a self-organizing component to any organization that it's referred to as the informal organization. So really, you always have both of them operative. So in some organizations, that informal organization might be stronger, and in some organizations, it might be weaker. And I can remember when I worked for the telecom company, I was one of the people, I respected that top-down organizational structure, and I would work within that hierarchy. But ever so often, if there was something that I knew had to get done, and it had to get done quickly and soon, then I knew who to go to and say, you know, there's this problem, we need to do something about it, let's fix it now. And so when I was doing that, I was operating within the informal organization. So both existed and both were operative. And the informal structure, the way I see it, is very important. A lot of work really gets done there. However, it's more unseen, unacknowledged, and unrewarded. So I don't know if you've been thinking about the Wizard of Oz and which one is which character, but it's probably clear the first. So I guess in chat, if you like, you can chat and say, so the first one was the brains of the organization are reduced to a few. The second one was that the heart of the organization ends up getting left behind when sustaining the organization itself becomes the main goal. And the third one was when trying to make changes in the system can be very difficult and very uneasy within these kinds of command and control systems. And then the fourth one here is the big illusion. A lot of the work gets done in the self-organizing part of the system. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop sharing the screen. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you about a different way of looking at a self-organizing system. So this way was identified. So this way was identified by Dee Hock. Dee Hock is actually the first CEO of Visa International. And he was a really deep thinker about organizations and how they're structured and how they can work. And so Dee Hock's theory is called chaotic theory. So chaotic is made up of combining the words chaos and order. And so basically, and so I'm going to put this here. So we've got order and chaos. Hopefully you can see it. Well, anyway. And so one of the things that Dee Hock has noticed is that it's in the space in between the chaos and the order. It's in the chaotic field where you actually get the most effectiveness, the most creativity, and the most innovation. Basically, what Dee Hock noticed is that order is about the past. So our ideas about order come from the past and what we've seen and what we know from the past. So it's an important element of being an effective organization. And chaos, the chaos is about the future. It's about the unknown. It's the seeds, the ideas lying in the deep ground. And so if we want creativity and if we want innovation, we need to allow in the ideas from the future. We need to allow in the unknown. And so in order to be effective, we need to be in that space between chaos and order. And when Dee Hock identified the principles that it requires to be in that space, they end up being the same principles as a self-organizing system, which is a term from complexity science. And so one of the things that we see in our world with the command and control systems is that order is really seen as fundamental and important. And so putting in more and more order, more and more structure often ends up what's getting done. However, what happens is the order often ends up going into control. And when an organization is so orderly that it goes into control, what happens is it loses access to that chaotic field, that creative space in between the chaos and the order. And in a similar kind of way, if we have too much chaos, then we can go into chamos, which means apathy in Greek language. And so if we have no order, no structure, and we're trying to come together and get something done, it can be very frustrating, and we can end up in that space of apathy. Oh, I give up. There's no way to succeed here. So basically, as D. Hawk told us, we need to be in the space in between the chaos and the order. And initially, Visa International was set up to be a chaotic organization, which is a self-organizing system. However, it's not there anymore at all. Now it's a command and control type of system. And so one of the things that we see is that drives us towards control or chamos, it's often fear. So we think we don't have enough order, fear, and so we put in more control, or we're operating in this space of chaos with no structure. So then we get fearful and we go into apathy. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go back to slide sharing. And so so as you can see here on my backdrop on my board, I've got a command and control system here, and I've got a self-organizing system or a network system over here. And then these are the characters from The Wizard of Oz. So it's a backdrop. I'm not going to be using it again. So I'm going to share my screen again now. Oopsie. Okay. So I'm going to gloss over this slide because there's a lot of detail on here. So basically what this is comparing the self-organizing system with the command and control system. So a self-organizing system is more of a living organic type system. It evolves often with the innate intelligence within the system, whereas a command and control system is more mechanistic. When we want it to change, we've got to design in the changes. And so a self-organizing system is a network system where basically different people can be leaders at different points in time, whereas a command and control system is centrally controlled. And diversity is a really key element, well understood within a self-organizing system. There's no question that you need diversity, whereas in a command and control system, you're looking for homogeneity. So monocropping form of agriculture is part of the command and control system, because we're trying to get one way to do our agriculture, and we're not including the diversity. So I'm going to jump down to the bottom here. So one of the things in a self-organizing system is that uncertainty is okay. We are, because we're in this space between chaos and order, the chaos is the future, it is the unknown, so we need to be okay with uncertainty. Whereas in a command and control system, it's generally always about predictability. Can we predict the future? Can we plan for the future? And then sometimes we try to plan for the future, and then we can't change our plans because this is what we planned and this is what we want to get. So whereas in a self-organizing system, we understand that new ideas are going to emerge and they're really unknown, uncertain, and we need to be in flow and be with that possibility. And so the next thing I'm going to talk about is that I've come to see that there's two different mental models operative within between the two types of systems, between the command and control and the self-organizing systems. So in the with the command and control systems, it's about control and protection. And so that protection and control ends up being a container of what's possible. And whereas in a self-organizing system, it's more about trust, trusting the future, and it's more of an opening towards new possibility. In a command and control system, we often think that the larger the organization, the better, because then we can take advantage of the efficiencies that we might get with the size. And so hence we have a lot of global organizations now. Whereas with a self-organizing system, smaller systems are often seen as better. And then a lot of smaller systems interacting is a possible way to organize, for us to organize in this world. In a command and control system, and this is very much a mental model, I believe, that we really carry in our culture, is that there has to be someone in charge in order to get things done. There's got to be one strong person that can guide us and get things done and we can follow. Whereas in a self-organizing system, what we recognize that different people can step forward and lead at different points in time, depending on their interest and their particular knowledge. And so we can all step forward when it's ours to step forward, when it's something that we know about. In command and control systems, we're always looking to make things more efficient. And this making things more efficient has, the way I see it, it's turned in on itself. We're trying to get rid of the slack, make things more efficient, but then we end up with no room for the unknown to come in, no room for possibility. And so I've seen it as not being healthy. Whereas with a self-organizing system, diversity is really important. And if we look at nature, nature is very diverse, very abundant. In nature is always when there's changes afoot in nature, nature produces so many. If it's a new bacteria, so many might appear, and then through evolution, it's seen, okay, these are the most effective, then all the others will fall away. So nature operates with abundance and diversity always. In a command and control system, the command and control system is a safety-seeking system. It's a system that's looking for safety. How do we make sure we don't have problems? Whereas a self-organizing system is about no fear and really seeing what's coming at us, what's emerging, and adapting, and recognizing that the world cannot be controlled. Our organizations cannot be controlled. So I see. So for me, there's two different mental models operative within the two kinds of systems, and I see these all over the place within our world. A lot of our thinking somehow seems to be part of these different points, different ways of thinking. Okay, so next, I'm going to stop screen sharing again. I have another toy. I have another toy to show you. This toy is one that I made myself. So we'll see. Okay, so basically what I want to talk about now is the individual versus the collective. So who are we as individuals, and then how do we come together in collectives. And here you'll see I've got this order and chaos piece again that I spoke about earlier. So as an individual, we all have 3 brains. I learned, I mean, this is common knowledge to many people, but I learned about this from Frederick Laloux, who wrote a book called Reinventing Organizations, where he talks about beautiful examples of organizations playing around with self-organization. And so basically we all have 3 brains. We have our head brain, we have our heart brain, and we have our gut brain. And it turns out that energetically the strongest brain is our heart brain. And so our hearts are actually always communicating. But I don't know what happens on a Zoom call, how that works. That's and our gut brain, it turns out, is sending more messages up to the brain than the brain is sending down to the gut. So there is sort of this vertical alignment within us as human beings that's needed for us to be whole, healthy, and happy. And I know that my own self, I have my issues. I often let my shoulders droop and my head go forward. And I'm realizing what's happening when I do that. Then my head brain is online, my heart brain is back, my gut brain is back, and they're not really fully online. And so for me, the practice now is to walk the dog and to be aware that I have 3 brains and to let them all be in alignment and all online, working together. And so this is sort of, you could say, the vertical alignment that is to help us be healthy human beings. And there's also a horizontal alignment that is helpful for us as individuals, and that's the order and the chaos. As I explained earlier, for an organization, the same thing applies to us as individuals. We get our ideas about order from the past. We get the new ideas, the brilliant ideas from the chaos, from the future. So in order to be effective, creative human beings, it's important for us to be in that present moment between the chaos and the order. So awareness of the order, the past, yep, we need that because the our ideas about how to organize come from the past, and then the future, the chaos, is also key for us to be creative human beings and to allow change into our personal way of living. And so similarly, what happens is if we become fearful and then we try to increase order and go to too much control, then we as an individual, it ends up being hard for us. So and certainly I've experimented with this one a lot because of my experience in grade 2 or 3 with starting to learn about what happened in World War II. I realized that one of my traits is I do have strong organizational skills, but because of what I learned about World War II, I did go into denial quite a bit about my organizational skills. And I ended up in a life of bouncing back and forth between being very organized and very disorganized. So for me, the real practice is how to get into that present state. And in the same way, fear, if we can drive us towards camos, if we're afraid of the unknown, the chaos, and so we avoid the chaos, then we end up losing access to the creativity. So similarly, so how can we, what about the collective? So as we spoke about earlier, for the collective, you also need this horizontal alignment of acknowledging, recognizing, working with both chaos and order, and being in the state in between the chaos and order, which is the state of being present to what is. To be, for example, if we're making a plan, if we're a group of people that came together and we're making a plan, and it's fine to make plans. We use our knowledge of order, we use our knowledge from the past to make a plan. But if we then hold that plan so solid that we're not going to deviate even when new information comes at us from the external world or even from our internal world, then we're not being in that present state. And then usually problems do arise. We see problems with plans all the time in organizations. And so within a collective, we also have the need for that vertical alignment, that our three brains online. And so that's about, if we have our collective, our organizing, our system composed of individuals who have their three brains online, then we do have both the horizontal alignment and the vertical alignment within our collective. So the real question is, how can we create organizations that are fully online, vertical and horizontal alignment? And I think this is something, and I don't know the answer of how to actually really get us to move there, but I think this gives us some good ideas of what's possible and what could be possible and how things could work differently. So next, I have some stories to tell about the command and control systems versus self-organizing system, stories that can help us think about these things and learn from them. So one is there's many organizations in the world that are experimenting with different ways to be a self-organizing system. One of them is Mondragon in northern Spain. They've been doing that since the 50s. They've basically set up a network of cooperatives. And then there's also an organization called Maverick in Brazil. And one of the things that I've heard from both of these organizations, I don't know if it's currently true, but one of the things I've heard from both of these organizations is that they think that the best thing would be to have a maximum organization size of 100, which that's a pretty radical statement given what we see in the world currently. But I remember that, and I think it's a very interesting possibility. And so there's a lot of other organizations experimenting with being a self-organizing system. There's a clothing company called Zappos. There's Patagonia, the outdoor company. And then Buurtzorg is a company in the Netherlands that provides home care. So they really experimented going from order into control, and everybody was unhappy. So they completely threw it out and put in something new, a real self-organizing system. And there's a lot more employee happiness with the self-organizing system. So they do have a central piece, but that central piece is more about learning and co-learning, learning together, and then each part of the organization across the country, they can pick up that learning or not as they wish to do, because in each part of the country, they may have different requirements. And then so Visa International was self-organizing, was set up to be self-organizing in 1975. And there's, the Occupy movement and the Arab Spring, and you could even say that some of the terrorist movements have large self-organizing aspects to them. So it's not necessarily always a good thing to be self-organizing. There's a struggle. Okay. So the next story I'm going to tell you is a story that to me really illustrates that the lens, the framework from which we see something has a big impact on how and what we are actually seeing in the world. So so Tom Hartman tells us about in the United States, there's a particular meadow with deer that biologists have been studying for a long time. This meadow with the deer is particularly interesting because twice a day the deer have to decide which watering hole they're going to be going to. And so the biologists had always assumed that the watering hole that they would go to would be made by the deer with the big buck, the big antlers on the head. And so that was the assumption. And it's an important decision because there could be predators, and they need enough water especially for the young and the old. And so then one day the biologists decided to take a look and say, okay, how do the deer make the decision? So then they started to watch, and what they saw was that when it was starting to get time to go to one of the two watering holes, the deer started to point their noses in the direction of one or the other watering hole. And when 51% of the deer pointed to one watering hole, then that was where they went. I love that story because it speaks to democracy, true democracy within a group of animals. And so democracy is all over the place in our natural world because democracy is aligned with self-organizing systems, not with command and control systems. Okay. So another story to illustrate is one of the themes that has become really dominant in our world is the theme of competition. And we seem to have this idea that it's through competition that things get done and that evolution has happened, and that competition is an important part of how the world evolved. Well, it turns out that this idea, it's thought, largely came from Darwin and Darwin's idea of survival of the fittest. And when we take a closer look, we learn that, Darwin recognized that survival of the fittest was one little component. Like his book, The Descent of Man, has the word love in it something like 70 times, whereas the word survival of the fittest is in that book maybe 4 times. So it turns out that it was one of Darwin's disciples, who actually was the person who really put out into the world this idea of survival of the fittest is key, and competition is how the world works. So now scientists are more and more looking and understanding that really the world evolved a lot based on collaboration. Even when one animal eats another animal, there's an element of collaboration. It's the animal that's being eaten, when you observe it, often it's giving itself up for the other animal. So even in those kinds of situations, there is an element of collaboration. So it's something that we're learning. And so the command and control system is inherently more a competitive type system, whereas the self-organizing system is inherently more of a collaborative, a system of collaboration. And so another story about Yellowstone Park I love because it illustrates for me that nature is always there holding our back. Nature knows how to recover from the things that we humans are doing to it. So in Yellowstone Park many years ago, the wolves were reintroduced into the park, and it was quite something to see as the wolves were reintroduced. A lot of ecosystems recovered. Because the deer were being kept in check, and the running of the deer with their hooves were tilling the soil, and birds came back that hadn't been there anymore. Small animals came back. Even the rivers changed how they were running through that space. So within a few years, the ecosystem of Yellowstone Park revived and came back and became stronger and healthier. And another story is about in the remember that big tsunami that we had in 2004 that originated in Indonesia. One of the things I heard at that time is that on the Andaman Islands in the Indian Ocean, even though the tsunami went by there full force, people didn't die there. And apparently what happened is in the Andaman Islands, the people, before the tsunami came, they went to higher ground. And so for me, I see that as a self-organizing system that was able to listen to the earth. And, possibly they were seeing the animals and maybe the animals heard, but anyway, the animals and the people went to higher ground during the tsunami. And I see somehow that connection to nature, to earth, as one of the things that can help us and can keep us stronger and healthier. Another example is dams. In some places now in the United States, it's actually become law to remove dams that are no longer being used. And one of the things that you see quite regularly when a dam is removed is that the ecosystem downstream from the dam often recovers to an old ecosystem, and people are quite surprised to see what revives. So that nature seems to have a memory of what can be healthy, and nature is able to bring that back to a healthy ecosystem. So the last piece I'm going to talk about, so to give us some time for questions and answers. So the last piece I'm going to talk about is, so here we have a ball. And so these points, these red points, the points on the ball are, if this represents the world. And so these points on the ball represent the points of power and control in our world. So currently in our world, these points of power and control are mostly with corporations and nation states, religions, institutions, and we humans are living inside here. 7.5 billion people living in here, and it's the power and control comes from the brains at the top of these many organizations in the world. And so basically the head and the heart is separated in this kind of a situation, because the people are inside, the brains are on top. Whereas having a world like this structure is inherently not a democratic structure, because it's being controlled from a few points. In order to have a democratic structure in this world, we need to open this ball so that all people are, the head and the heart is connected. We're all online, we're all equal. And even people with disabilities are equal to all other people, and we all have a say of what can go on this earth, and we can be for sure in charge of ourselves, and our heads and our hearts are connected. So I don't want to mislead you. Power is a good thing. However, power needs to be within our human beings, that are where we have our three brains in alignment with us. And so if we have an earth where all the individuals have their power, then I believe we'll have a much, much healthier earth. And so when we're all equal, we'll also start to realize our embeddedness in the natural world, which is a more self-organizing world, we'll see our interconnectedness and we'll realize our oneness. So I'll leave you with a question. So can we begin to see that there's a new paradigm is emerging? Can we see the weak signals of this new paradigm that is coming? Can we see the beautiful new possibilities? And how am I being as an individual within this new emerging paradigm? How can I keep myself in alignment on a more ongoing basis? So I invite you to ask any questions. So about what I've been talking about here. So
Thank you very much, Pamela. That was very, very powerful. There is one question on the chat. You made reference to a source of your research, but did not catch the name, or is there a book?
Well, yeah, one is Frederick Laloux, Laloux, and he wrote a book called Reinventing Organizations, where he wrote about many different organizations that are experimenting with self-organizing.
Thank you.
Pamela,
Go ahead, Gita.
thank you. That was extraordinary, and I love the visuals, and I love the pop-up of the last one. So what brought you to exploring the subject? You've obviously put a lot of work and thought into these two paradigms that you presented to us. What is it that makes it so fascinating for you?
Yeah, I guess, I mean, my whole life put me here, and in terms of being interested in systems and structures from many different, technology and human systems. But I guess for me, one of the really fascinating pieces here is that I think to a large extent, a lot of this stuff is unseen. People are not seeing it. And I think it's having a huge impact on us because we're, the autonomy, freedom of the individual is really key, is really fundamental. That's one of the strong messages that I'm talking about. However, even though this freedom and autonomy of the individual is key, one of the things that's really important is to recognize we're part of all these systems and structures all over the place, these collectives. We're part of a family, we're part of an organization, we're part of the government structure. And so to see those and to see the impacts that they're having on us and the cultures, the cultures are holding our values and reflecting it back to us. And if we want to change our values, we actually have to start looking at our cultures and the impact that they're having on us to make changes.
Mm-hmm. Thanks. I like that. The importance of the values that you're just talking about.
Karen, you have a hand?
Hi, Pamela, thank you so much. I'm a family coach, and I have raised 4 boys and grew up in a family of 6. And there was a message in the chat about the nuclear families. And this is so powerful for me. And I had never referenced the Wizard of Oz in this way. And for me, there's so much happening in this conference that's shaping how I'm able to now go into families. My goal is I do family work in the family homes on a soul level already, yet it's about the stories. And and extrapolating the truth of, you know, our history and with systemic racism and these organizations, as you're talking about. So I related so much to what you were saying. And I had to giggle a little bit. I'm an early childhood educator, and I just wrote down flannel board stories. And so I don't actually have I don't have the words to impress how valuable this presentation. I'm so glad it is on the Compassion Games Facebook page. I think somebody just asked that in the chat.
Yeah.
And it will be there, and you can go to that and you can save the link. And I know that I'll be sharing it. So I look forward to more, and thank you so much.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you.
I really appreciated your presentation, Pamela. I wanted to take a little bit more of a look at systems, but I haven't taken time to study it. So getting a quick overview of this, and really what I appreciated out of this is that I've always been someone that was swimming against the current, as far as I'm definitely more of a self-organizing modeled person, and in every work environment I've been in, I've done better in my, just all around that way, but I didn't have words to put to this. So in a way, it gives me validation on that there's nothing wrong with me.
Yeah.
And I appreciated the broadening of my perspective of what I innately knew already. So now I understand how the pieces fit. Many thank yous.
Thank you. Yeah, my life pushed me there. My whole life, I didn't have much choice.
Marie and Gord.
Hi, thank you, Pamela. That was great presentation. My feeling is about all of what that in my body is in my heart. And if I'm moving with my heart and listening to it, I'm going to be doing what I need to do anyway. So I'm all for listening to my heart and moving in that direction. And I'm happiest when I'm doing that too. So that makes me happy. It makes me easy to be with, and allows me to have fun with my life.
Another element I'd like to give you an opportunity to elaborate on, Pamela. I really enjoyed your presentation. It's about expectations, and I think that those self-organizing principles certainly allow you to put your expectations to one side so that you can have a healthier relationship with the uncertainty that surrounds us.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. And I'd like to remind you, Marie, as our common friend Maya told us, we need to keep both our heart, head, brain, and our heart, brain online, you know, because the heart brain can sometimes mislead us because it can really get emotional. Emotions are so important to listen to, but sometimes, you know, we need them both.
Oh yeah.
Maya often told us that.
We definitely need them all working together.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
You can take your hand down.
So Nana has a question.
Oh, okay. You have to unmute, Nana.
How's that?
Perfect.
No. Okay, thank you. I have a question. It has to do with that center space that I just loved your presentation. It just is a beautiful healing story for us to hear at this time, in case we were forgetting any of the parts. and so what I want to say is that you mentioned the gut, and everybody's mentioning the head and the heart. And I've been a yogi for over 20 years, and not just yogi, but Qigong and Feldenkrais and a lot of inner body, mind, spirit work. And that gut, you said, is what is continually bringing messages back up again. You got to listen to it. And we have to be much more in our inner selves first. First, absolutely. Own oxygen mask first. Get yourself squared away with whatever you need to do.
Yeah.
And then go out, because the chaos is always going to be there. And unless you have that centered self, that true alignment. So many, we hear of chakras and energy centers, and Eastern philosophy thinks of three main ones: the gut, the heart, and the mind. And it's much easier to hold that. So thank you for sharing that. And may we all seek our own inner guidance, wisdom, and be there and stay there for as long as we need to be there and to share appropriately. Thank you. Beautiful time for us to be holding this loving energy for a whole weekend rather than just one day. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
It's 11:16. We have a few minutes. And if there are no further questions, would you like to make any closing remarks, Pamela?
No, I guess I want to thank everyone for participating in this and for listening to me. This is my first online presentation, so it's it's tricky because I like to try and do the presentation with toys, but how to use toys in an online environment was kind of a big question. And I'd like to thank Paul for doing the Zoom hosting. I didn't realize it ended up being quite a bit of work. And I'd also like to thank Karen for helping us out with all the technical stuff, getting this going. So thank you for participating, and thank you.
And thank
Pamela,
you,
can you tell us how else we can find you when you do more of these?
Oh, well, yeah, I guess it's my on I'll share my screen. I have a
You could put your email in the chat, Pamela, and they could contact you.
I have it here, but I guess I can put it in the chat too. So here's my email and my website. So on my website, I have it's not a good website, but on my website, I have an old version of this presentation, and then my Facebook. So I have my Facebook, Wisdom Works Wonders, and then I also have my Facebook, Pamela Schreiner. And like some people, I'm thinking of moving away from Facebook, but I'm there at the moment. So that this all works. So I guess,
Thank you.
yeah, I guess that would be